Fam, the big day has finally dawned. Cat Matlala speaks in Parliament. It was quite the entrance. Take a look at how he made this grand visit to Kgosi Mampuru Correctional Facility, where he delivered unprecedented testimony.
Can you please sit down?
Wow. I don't think we've ever seen this in South Africa. A whole parliamentary ad hoc committee going to a prison where an awaiting trial prisoner is being held and asking him questions before the entire nation. It was a fascinating moment, and I want to take you through all the key moments in Cat Matlala's testimony today, and also make sure that we summarize this for you so that you encapsulate everything that happened very quickly. Quick roadmap, because today was a massive day in the Mkhwanazi saga, one we need to pay very close attention to. First, we figured out who Cat Matlala is and how he got this tender at the police, which became such a key area of contestation, that 360 million rand tender. Then we had how he got to know General Sibiya. We then had the raid at his home by the PKTT on the 6th of December, which led into how he met Bheki Cele, the former police minister, and then finally, bombshell allegations that he even met General Lt Mkhwanazi in April of this year. So much to cover, so let's get into all of that. The first thing is, who is Cat Matlala and how did he get this tender? He's a business person, according to him, but we learned that he has a previous conviction from 2001 for possession of stolen property. This tender thing is textbook, complex, organized fraud in a way. Because get this, there's this holding company called Medicare24. It's actually not owned by Cat Matlala at all. It's owned by, according to him, a certain Mr. Van Wyk and one other person. And they provide medical healthcare services to various companies. Medical screening, even some clinic services, it appears, but medical services, right? Now, apparently they live on the same estate as Cat Matlala, and they get to talking one day. And they realize, okay, this Cat Matlala seems to be a business person. They ask him what he does. He says sometimes he provides medical supplies to hospitals. And they say, okay, cool, let's do this deal where we'll give you our brand, Medicare24, but you kind of create a sub-franchise of our brand. Let's call it Medicare24 Tshwane District. And you own that, but we continue to own the parent holding company of this that is connected to this, and you can get government tenders. Of course, this helps with BEE as well, because your subcontracting entity will be able to be wholly black owned, and you can get the credibility of our brand, but you'll kind of have your own franchise of our brand. And that's how Medicare24 Tshwane District comes about. So this is a sophisticated operation where you have an existing brand, but then it does some dealings to kind of outsource that brand to a black partner who then is able to get government tenders using what connections he has within these government departments. It takes us into the world of how those who use the tender system for their own gains have become extremely complicated in the means that they use, and also how the idea and the principle of black economic empowerment, which is a noble principle, can get subverted by nefarious actors who use those noble intentions to actually benefit financially purely themselves. So there is a deeper question here about how the tender system and how BEE can be subverted by those with potentially criminal intentions. But that's how Cat Matlala eventually gets this company, which seems to have some credibility because it's linked to this deeper Medicare24 company, and how he ends up landing this 360 million rand tender with the police to do health screening and all this kind of stuff for them. Now, interestingly, his company is also involved in a lease. Now, a lease is like a rental agreement, right? And he is supposed to lease police premises so that this kind of medical work can happen on these premises. And he leases this building that the police are in from the Department of Public Works. But he can't get the police and the doctors who are already there off the property, despite the fact that he has, according to him, a valid contract to lease the property for his purposes. So he says, because he has this problem, he's got a lease with Public Works, but the police who are occupying the property are not vacating. He tries to go to the police to say, hey, I need help here. I've got a lease, but you guys are effectively not moving. I need you to move so I can use the property for my own purposes. A few questions already come up because I said this in a previous episode and some of y'all corrected me, but it actually turns out I was right the first time. Who gave Cat Matlala this lease from Public Works? And who was the Minister of Public Works at the time? It wasn't the police who gave him this contract. It was actually Public Works with whom he had this contract. I believe at the time, the minister would have been Sihle Zigalala. I could be wrong. But in any case, he's already currently the deputy minister. Cat Matlala says he still has that lease contract. Why does Public Works have a contract with Cat Matlala? Patricia de Lille could also have been minister at that. We need to know who was the minister at that time and what was the nature of the arrangement. Did they know who they were entering into? And why does Public Works under Dean McPherson's ministry right now still, according to Matlala, have a contract? That needs to be clarified immediately. Okay, cool. So Cat Matlala is trying to figure out this lease problem that he has. And this is where he says he meets Sibiya, because he then says to Sibiya, hey, I've got this problem. Can you help me? And that's how they end up meeting. Now, he says he has 2 meetings with Sibiya about this lease thing. Sibiya tells him, hey, look, I can't help you. Masemola says, we're not going to be told what to do. Masemola is the police commissioner. We're not going to be told what to do by Public Works. So effectively, the police stay there. And Matlala says he believes there was some kind of corrupt relationship between the people who are occupying the property and the police. And they effectively haven't been able to evict them off this property even up until today. But that's how the Sibiya connection, according to Matlala, actually happens. And of course, it's a fateful connection because Mkhwanazi is going to draw these links between Sibiya and Matlala in his press conference of the 6th of July this year. Now, again, Matlala says the third time he was in contact with Sibiya was over a kidnapping of a certain Jerry Boshoga. And this time he says Sibiya called him about the kidnapping of Jerry Boshoga. Now, unfortunately, we didn't get further questioning from the evidence leader or anyone in Parliament clarifying this, because I would have wanted to know, and hopefully tomorrow we'll get this. What did Sibiya say to you about this kidnapping? And what did you say in response to Sibiya? Did Sibiya say they're looking for leads? Did he say you're a suspect in this kidnapping case, which we know Matlala eventually was? And what did Matlala reply to Sibiya? So that is how he says he met Sibiya. And that then takes us to the 6th of December, because on that day, Cat Matlala's home is raided and the Political Killings Task Team is actually looking for the same Jerry Boshoga at his house. Apparently, this is a 5 to 7 hour operation at his house. It was the same day that the PKTT was also at Katie Molefe's house, that very infamous arrest where the Hawks tried to intercept the PKTT and interfere with their work, according to many people in the PKTT. So now when they're raiding Cat Matlala's house, Matlala alleges that there are various breaches of his rights during that raid. He says his wife is mistreated, his kids are intimidated, and some of his articles are taken by the police, including these expensive watches, Rolexes and Cartiers. So he is then now on the warpath, and he wants to lodge cases against the police for the way that they mishandled this raid in his story. And he then goes to the police station the next day and tries to lodge cases against those PKTT members. One of them is a Colonel Khumalo, not to be confused with General Khumalo, who's the head of crime intelligence. Colonel Khumalo has also testified at the Matlanga Commission already. And he makes these allegations against the police, and the case is underway in December of last year. And he wants to nab the police for not having a search warrant and using intimidating tactics and theft. But then, suddenly, people start, according to Matlala, trying to take him away from these court cases against the police. And this is where Brown Mkhwanazi, according to him, comes in. He says Brown Mkhwanazi calls him, kind of out of nowhere, saying, "Hey, I work in the office of the minister, and I think I can help you with this problem that you have." In addition, Bheki Cele, former police minister, a meeting is set up between Cat Matlala, a Mr. Mpungose, and Bheki Cele. And there, at the Beverly Hills Hotel in Umhlanga, we hear that, okay, you actually have to get a load of this, because this is where the story starts getting deep, fam. So Bheki Cele meets with Cat Matlala and this other person who was the mediator and brought them together. And effectively he says, look, withdraw this case that you have against the police as a gesture of goodwill. And in return, I'll make sure that you get back the firearms that were taken from you during this raid. And like night follows day, Cat Matlala withdraws the case. He soon after goes to the Brooklyn police station and he's given back his firearms. So already Matlala is suggesting that there is some kind of relationship of benefits and favor here, or alleging, between him and Bheki Cele. Obviously, this flies in the face of Bheki Cele's testimony that there wasn't an improper relationship between him and Matlala. So we already have one suggestion here. Bheki Cele convinced Matlala to drop his case in return for his firearms. Now, General Khumalo, by the way, in the Matlanga Commission has already said that there were problems around the lawful possession of these firearms. So the fact that they would have been returned to him raises at least a question about whether they were returned at the right time or not. Now, Matlala goes further. And he says that after this meeting, Bheki Cele then started asking him for favors. And you'll remember that Cele has already admitted that he stayed in Matlala's penthouse in Brooklyn, in Pretoria. And now we get further detail according to Matlala, because Cele then says to Matlala, according to him, Matlala that is, that Cele said, "I've already helped you and you're not showing appreciation." So Matlala then paid him money. And Matlala says he paid Cele 300,000 and then 200,000. So again, of course, Cele didn't mention this. So someone's lying. Either Cele got this money and Cele is not telling the truth, or Matlala didn't pay Cele and Matlala is not telling the truth. But one of them is not telling the truth. Now, this suggests a lot of questions about the testimony. Now, of course, we'll need to hear from Bheki Cele. It'll be fascinating when he goes to the Matlanga Commission, now that this has emerged, how he will respond to and attempt to rebut or refute these allegations. But we now clearly have conflicting testimony. Just a quick correction, Cat Matlala's penthouse was in Menlyn, not Brooklyn. Okay, so furthermore, right, as according to Matlala's version, he's helping Cele with money. This question of his contract, Remember, because Medicare24 Tshwane district now has this contract with the police. But there are these murmurings that the police want to cancel this contract. Probably because there is seriously important reporting coming out. People like Jeff Wicks at News 24 saying, hold on a second, there's a link here with Cat Matlala. Cat Matlala has allegations about improper conduct around Tembisa Hospital. And so how can the police have a contract with this person? And so there are clearly internal conversations in the police going on about, do we keep this contract or do we not? And Cele, according to Matlala, is playing a key role in helping Matlala try to save this contract. And Matlala is complaining because he's saying, look, I've got this contract and the value is 360 million, but I'm not getting purchase orders. I'm not actually getting the work. I'm not being able to screen the people. So I actually don't have this money. So you keep asking me to pay you, but nobody's helping me actually get the money out of the police that I need in order to be able to pay. And remember, in parallel with this, Brown Mkhwanazi is also asking Cat Matlala to make payments because he's suggesting that he can connect him to the minister. Now, this is where the story takes a turn, fam, and a twist is introduced because Cat Matlala then says that Bheki Cele helps him by facilitating a meeting with General Lt Mkhwanazi. This is something that Brown Mkhwanazi has also alleged at the Madlanga Commission, that Cat Matlala and General Mkhwanazi actually met in Umhlanga. Brown Mkhwanazi says he sent a car to follow Cat Matlala and the car stopped somewhere in Umhlanga. However, there is an inconsistency because Cat Matlala says he drove there, whereas Brown Mkhwanazi says he followed Cat Matlala from the airport. So a few inconsistencies emerging there. But, of course, this is really important because General Mkhwanazi did not tell us that he met with Cat Matlala. So again, only one version can be true. Did Mkhwanazi omit this meeting with Cat Matlala, which would be a massive omission? Or is Cat Matlala being untruthful about the fact that he met General Mkhwanazi at the Pearl Umhlanga? Anyway, let's look at what he says happened at that meeting. And this is quite complicated, but I hope I can break it down for you because even the evidence leaders and some of the parliamentarians were still trying to figure out exactly what Cat Matlala is saying here, but I think I've got it. So remember, Matlala is keen to save this contract that he has with the police. And he says that Mkhwanazi has heard in this meeting, so Mkhwanazi is now talking to Matlala. Picture them, they're at the Pearl Umhlanga and they're having this conversation. Mkhwanazi says, it looks like Mkhunu and Sibia have allied together to try and save this contract. So Mkhunu, who was initially trying to cancel the contract, seems to have been turned and is now in agreement with Sibia that we can save the contract, presumably so that Cat Matlala can help them financially. So Mkhwanazi is telling him this. But now, because Masemola is against the contract being saved, or rather because he's pushing for it to be cancelled, there is worry that Cat Matlala will take out Masemola, right? Because he's the person then standing in the way of this contract being saved. So then Mkhwanazi says to Matlala in this meeting that he told Masemola, listen, your life could be in danger, but I will take care of Matlala if there is any suggestion that he would take you out to save the contract. Are you with me here? So let's repeat that one more time so we're clear. So Mkhwanazi and Matlala are meeting. Matlala tells him, I'm trying to save the contract. Mkhwanazi says, it looks like the minister's now on board, but there's one stumbling block. Sibia and minister on board, but Masemola is the stumbling block. So we were worried that you might try to take out Masemola because he was the only stumbling block. But I will take you out, I told Masemola, before you try to take Masemola out, Mr. Matlala. that sounds like a very interesting conversation that two people had. I just don't know. Like, you're telling me Mkhwanazi sat across from Matlala and was like, I will take you out before you take Masemola out. Or at least that's what we were planning. Gee, wasn't exactly tea and crumpets in that conversation, that's for sure. So, there we go. That was the meeting with Mkhwanazi and Sibiya at that apartment block / hotel. But then Mkhwanazi says, look, there's a further stumbling block. There's a General Nkuwa, and that person is the point person for the contract. So Masemola might be the national commissioner, but this is the real person within the police who looks after that contract. And that person is in the pocket, according to Matlala again, of the previous service provider, which I believe is Metropolitan. They've given her all kinds of money and gratuities and gifts. And you're not going to be able to convert her, because the only way you can convert her is if you give her the same amount of money. But I will try to help you on that. Mkhwanazi is saying to Matlala, according to Matlala, of course, if you help me on something. See, I've got this problem of a case of torture, and the victims have taken me to IPID for this case of torture. So I need you to help me get them to drop the case. And I believe that one of them lives in the same residential area as you. So let me help you try to save the contract, see what I can do on that front, but can you help me with this IPID torture thing? So again, Matlala is alleging there was some kind of quid pro quo, some kind of inappropriate relationship, some kind of exchange for favors that's going on. So in a nutshell, he's directly implicating General Mkhwanazi in wrongdoing. And furthermore, Mkhwanazi says, not only should these people drop the case, but I need them to incriminate Sibiya and Mkhunu instead of me. So get them to say that we're dropping the case, and the only reason we brought the case is because Sibiya and Mkhunu told us to. So in a nutshell, two big things come out of this testimony that we didn't know, maybe three. The first one, which is kind of big, is just knowing the mechanisms of how the Medicare24 contract came about and how the business dealings were structured. That's interesting for those of us who are trying to understand how corruption works. But I would say the other two things are really seismic political bombshell allegations. One, that Matlala himself actually paid Bheki Cele, and that he was doing favors for Bheki Cele in order, and there was a reciprocal relationship of favors, which involved money and other things. And the second thing is that he met Mkhwanazi, and that Mkhwanazi also tried to engage in an inappropriate relationship of mutual favors. Now, of course, I suspect Cele will vehemently deny this. Mkhwanazi will vehemently deny this as well. So what I've tried to do is summarize Cat Matlala's version today. That doesn't mean that what he's saying is true, but it helps you understand what the import of what he said today is for this broader Mkhwanazi saga. Also, another interesting wrinkle in this is that remember that Mkhwanazi alleged that Bheki Cele did get money from Cat Matlala. But then he withdrew that allegation. But now Cat Matlala reinserts that allegation. So there is something interesting about this question that we need to get to the bottom of. Why would Mkhwanazi make the allegation, then withdraw it? And is Cat Matlala maybe jumping on that opportunistically to say, no, it actually did happen? Or is there substance to the suggestion that there was some kind of inappropriate exchange of money for political favor? Well, I guess more will be found out. It'll be very interesting to hear Bheki Cele's version at the Madlanga Commission as he goes there. Mkhwanazi will be back at the Madlanga Commission, and of course Cat Matlala ultimately will also go to the Madlanga Commission. So we're going to get deeper into this. But what's going to happen tomorrow? Tomorrow, Nomaan, evidence leader, will continue his testimony for 2 hours, and then MPs will get to ask the key questions here. One thing I hope MPs are able to probe is, what is the link between, if any, Matlala and Mkhunu? Because that link has not yet been fully established. But if they can uncover any kind of link there, that'll be important. Matlala continues to deny that he knows or ever knew Mkhunu, but of course, Brown Mokhotsi gave different testimony. Nkabinde suggested there might be something different there too. So that's going to be important. We need more details on all of this. More details on that meeting, on the Sibia call about the Boshoga kidnapping. We need more details on that Beverly Hills meeting. We need more details on the money. We need more details on the meeting with Mkhwanazi. And we need to see what was happening around those incidents as well, because there were lots of fascinating moments that would happen around this set of incidents. I want to take you to a couple of things that were happening around this December period, right? Because on the 7th of December, Matlala opens a case because the day before, the police had raided his house. On the 18th, there's a second raid. On the 19th, WhatsApp chats with Brown Mokhotsi begin. On the 20th, Cat Matlala resigns from Medicare24. On the 23rd, Brown Mokhotsi inquires with Matlala about something to do with IPID. Now, this IPID thing remains a mystery. Another scenario could be, is this related to IPID bringing charges against Mkhwanazi? Is it related to some other IPID situation? We also know that Khumalo met Cele over Matlala attempting to open a case against him. Matlala then meets Cele at the Beverly Hills. On the 24th, Mkhunu meets Masemola, raising concerns apparently over the tender. So all these different conversations are happening around this tender. Different players in this game are meeting in that crucial month of December. And remember, just a week after that, Mkhunu disbands the PKTT completely. On the 27th, Cele stays at Matlala's Menlyn penthouse. On the 30th, that ballistics report links the firearms to high-profile murders. And then, of course, the PKTT is dissolved. So there are a lot of things swirling around this, and we'll continue to try and put the pieces of the puzzle together for you. Fam, that's all for today. Keep it locked on SMWX. Like, share, subscribe. If you're watching this on YouTube, drop a subscription, become a member. Remember, we also have podcasts, and we are climbing up the podcast charts in South Africa. So go and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. If you're watching or if you're listening on the move, give us a rating on podcast platforms. Get yourself some SMWX merch, fam. SMWX.store. That's SMWX.store. And otherwise, we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for keeping it locked on SMWX. And let's keep following the saga right to the end. Aye.